We are live.
Okay. Let
Welcome
me know
to,
when I should start.
I think we're ready to go.
Okay.
Welcome to another virtual author event at the Poison Pen Bookstore. I'm John Charles, and today we are delighted to have with us esteemed author Connie Briscoe, whose new book is Chloe. We are also joined by another wonderful author, Wanda Morris, and together they're going to talk about Connie's new book. Before we begin, the Poison Pen does have copies of Chloe on order, and we would be happy to hold one for you or put one in the mail. Just give us a call or go online to the Poison Pen Bookstore. Now I'd like to welcome Connie Briscoe and Wanda Morris.
Thank you. Thank you for
You.
having me.
Thank
Hey,
you.
Connie, how are you?
I'm good.
Good, good,
I'm
good.
good. Great seeing you finally.
Great seeing you too. Thank
Yeah,
you.
really good.
So, this is your new book, Chloe. And let
Yes.
me just give a brief bio of
Oh,
you.
sure.
Connie Briscoe has been an author for 3 decades. Her novels have hit the bestseller list of the New York Times, Chicago Tribune, Washington Post, Boston Globe, Boston Herald, USA Today, and Publishers Weekly. She has been featured in numerous publications and on television programs, including Good Morning America. And her latest book is Chloe, which
Yes.
is what I'm holding up here. And just so you know, Connie, it's a phenomenal book. I
Mhm.
read it in a day and a half.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
so kudos to you. Um, so for anybody who hasn't read the book yet, why don't you tell us a little bit about Chloe?
Okay. Chloe is about a woman named Angel. She's in her, I can't remember the exact age, but she's in her early 30s. And she's a successful chef at a restaurant, at one of the top restaurants in Washington, D.C. And every summer she goes to Martha's Vineyard to work for a private family, or to work as a private chef for a middle class family who has a house on the island. And as the novel opens, it's her third time working as a private chef on Martha's Vineyard. And while she's there, much to the disappointment of her employer, Jillian, she meets a wealthy black man, a black billionaire on the island. And long story short, they begin a whirlwind romance. And by the time of her stay there, he's proposed to her. He whisked her off to his estate, Riverwild in Potomac, Maryland. And that's after an elaborate honeymoon. And I think after the honeymoon, when she gets to Riverwild, that's when things begin to change. And she begins to suspect that things may not be what they seem, and that Everett may have some dark secrets he's hiding from her.
Mm, yeah, it's a delicious little book full of secrets. And Amistad, who is your publisher, describes it as a retelling of Daphne du Maurier's um, Rebecca,
Yes.
which I could certainly see some of the similarities. And let's start with some of them, namely River Wild, which is Everett Bruce, who is the billionaire. His estate is called Riverwild, which has
Correspond to
some
Mandalay. I think
similarities, right?
Mandalay, I think in Rebecca.
Yeah, to
Yes.
Manderley, yes, from Rebecca. So talk to us a little bit about River Wild and the setting in general, because it's very ominous, very
Yes.
dark. So talk to us a little bit about that setting.
Well, I was certainly, I was inspired by a couple of things. One certainly was Mandalay, the estate in Rebecca. And by the way, that's sort of an aside. First read Rebecca probably years ago.
Mhm,
It was published, I think, in the 1930s or 1940s. And I read it years ago. And then I think there have been a couple of films, one a Hitchcock film based
mhm,
on the book. I saw that also years ago. But more recently, I saw the film Rebecca which aired on Netflix, I think, a few years ago. And that
Yeah.
was what really got me to thinking about writing the novel.
Mm.
And yes, and so certainly the private estate of Mandalay, if I'm pronouncing it correctly, was an inspiration. But also because since I decided to base the novel or put my estate in Potomac, Maryland, I was also inspired by the mansion of Dan Snyder, who was the coach for, I think it's the Washington Commanders now. Back then it was the Washington Redskins. We had to get rid of that name. But he has a huge multi-million dollar estate in Potomac. And you can go on and easily look at pictures of it. And, I could see at least some similarities in my mind to that estate, which I could see versus Manderley, which I could only see in the films. And
Mm.
so that's pretty much where I got the inspiration for Riverwild. I think it symbolizes, though, because when she first gets there, all the drapes are drawn, it's dark and gloomy and depression. And what I think Riverwild symbolizes is the immense, because it's a huge estate, beautiful estate with grounds and tennis courts and pools and all sorts of things. And what I think it symbolizes is the extreme wealth of the Bruces, but also because it's so dark and foreboding because the drapes are drawn, it's isolated, it's out
Mm.
on its own. I think that it also symbolizes the secrets behind the estate that she eventually comes to that eventually come to light for her. And that's what she spends pretty much the second half of the novel trying to dig deeper and get behind those secrets, many of which, if not all, kind of revolve around Everett's deceased wife, Chloe,
Yeah.
who
Yeah.
is the name that's where the name of the book comes from. Yes.
The book comes from. So tell us, I know there's some stark differences, but I'll let you describe. Tell us what the differences are between du Maurier's Rebecca and Chloe, your book.
Well, I think the most obvious difference is that Rebecca was written, I believe, in the 1930s or 1940s. Certainly the time was different. And Chloe is a more contemporary novel. The setting is more contemporary. Also, because I'm talking what I've done with Chloe, I've taken Rebecca, and although I use the same general frame, a lot of the details are different. The characters are different. What I've done is taken, and one of the things that attracted me about the novel was that it gets into some social and class differences among whites. And I immediately thought, well, I could certainly portray that in Black society because we have our class differences. Um, well, while I toyed with depicting some race differences between blacks and whites, but then I said, no, this could be just as interesting if I just get into the class and social and economic differences among blacks. And
Right.
so that's one of the things that's different is that the characters in the book are black,
Mhm.
and I explore that. Another key difference, I think, is that in Rebecca, and I don't believe that character is ever named in the book. The woman character in that book, I think she remains sort of anonymous, but
Right.
she's never really established. She's more or less the companion to the wealthy woman whose family she works for. Whereas Rebecca comes on, a black woman would never be hired as a companion if she has no experience whatsoever. So I wanted to give Rebecca a career. And that's why I made her a chef. So she's more established, certainly, than the protagonist in Rebecca. She's a sous chef at a top restaurant in Washington, D.C., and then becomes a private chef to her employer on the island. So in that way, she's different. I also think the ending, without giving it away, is very different from some of the previous the novel and the previous films. I remember there being a boat that figured prominently in the ending of the films, and probably in the novel. I do remember reading how Hitchcock tried to change the ending, and there was some blah going on about that. But and that's one, and we may talk about that, but that was one of the toughest things for me is coming up with the ending because I had read these endings where there's this boat scene, and I believe Rebecca drowns on the boat. And I wasn't sure that would work by the time I got to the ending. I had
Mhm.
done a lot of things differently from Rebecca, and I wasn't sure that that ending would fit with the way I had written it. And so I spent, probably weeks trying to come up with an ending that I thought would work. And then I realized it struck me I was making too much of it. It didn't have to be so difficult. And the
Mhm.
ending, if you see it, it is kind of, while I think it resolves all the points, it's simple, but it's effective. It works. I
Yeah.
realized that it didn't have to be so complicated.
Yeah, it's a very satisfying ending. I agree.
I'm good. I'm glad you like
Very
it.
different. You just alluded to one of the questions I was going to ask, which
Mhm.
is what was the biggest challenge in writing this book?
What the
Particularly,
challenges?
yeah,
Well, the
partic-
usual challenges in that previously I wrote relationship or women's fiction. They didn't have suspense. They may have had a kernel of suspense, and I think every novel needs some suspense or can benefit from some suspense, but they weren't suspense novels per se. So those challenges in terms of planning the red herrings and the clues and having it all work out in the end, that's always a challenge with writing suspense. I think that for this novel, in addition to that, it was like as we talked about before, the ending was complicated. I went back and forth. I talked to people about some solutions, and then I just sat quietly with myself and thought about it and realized that boom, the ending was right there in front of me. I just had to tweak some things and not make it so complicated. Sometimes we make things more complicated than they need to be. And if
Right.
you search through yourself and through what you've written, you realize what you want to say is right there, basically.
Yeah. One of the things too about the ending that I liked is that the ending um, it fit. It was appropriate for these characters
Yes. It, it let
without
it let it let Angel come into her own, I think.
exactly, exactly. It was
Mhm.
very, very appropriate for the type of character that you had drawn. And that's why I liked it so very much. So let's talk a little bit about the characters because you have some very interesting characters. And I think that you do something that is, really well. You make a comment about society through these characters like Angel, um, Everett Bruce, and then Angel's boss, Jillian.
Jillian, mhm.
Yes, who I thought was she was kind of a hoot too. Uh,
She was fun to work with because
yeah,
she's the character that you always have fun with because
she
she's so
is,
different
she
from my
is.
personality, but there are those types out there.
So talk to us, how did you come to craft these particular characters? Because I dare say too that excuse me, Angel is different from kind of the character Rebecca that we read in the original book. So how did you come to craft this cast of
Well,
characters?
she's the more modern woman. I think she
Hmm.
um, kind of, by that time, she's a chef and has been a chef for a while. She knows what she wants. She has a career. She's going after it. I believe she has a condo. So she's an established woman for her age. She's not doing too poorly. She has this beautiful summer job on the island. And I think that that is kind of what leads to the conflict between Angel and Jillian, her employer.
Yeah.
Jillian is one of these people, she's sort of straddling between middle class and the upper middle class. She's this social climber type. She gets her status mainly through her husband, who ironically is probably more typically successful than she is because of where he went to school. But he doesn't care about that kind of thing. It's his wife who is cares about that. Her daughter doesn't care about that. And so the playoff between Jillian and Angel, I think, depicts those what happens with those class differences. Although Angel is quite successful as a chef, Jillian thinks of her as, quote, only a cook,
Right.
because that's how she sees her. She's the type who feels better by making herself, putting herself above others.
People.
Um, and I think that Angel puts up with it for a while because, as she says, she wants to hold on to this job. She doesn't want to antagonize Jillian because she wants to keep this job. She loves her time on the island. And but one way that she fights back, I think, is by even when she realizes that Jillian doesn't approve of her relationship with Everett because Jillian thinks Everett is too good for
Mhm.
Angel. She
Yeah.
wants Angel for her own daughter, Norma, who, by the way, couldn't care about having a relationship with this Everett. But um, so I think that in terms of that whole dynamic, she's she's disappointed. Becomes very disappointed when they begin a relationship. And she makes it clear to Angel that she thinks that Everett is above her status. And
Mhm.
so Angel, I think for a while, she begins to feel somewhat insecure. I mean, who wouldn't when your employer is putting you in a position like that? But she bounces back, and she does that by it's kind of a quiet rebellion. She still sees Everett, but she keeps it on the down low. She doesn't tell her boss exactly what's going on. She sneaks around with them, but it's her way of quietly fighting back and doing what she wants to do, regardless of what her employer thinks about it.
Yeah, I thought Everett was a really refreshing character too, being a Black billionaire and traveling all over the world.
Yeah.
And I think at some point I can't remember the line, but it's almost as if he is aware of this wealth that he carries. But in some ways he kind of shuns it too. And I think that that is what is kind of the gravitational pull to he and Angel. I could be mistaken, but I love the chemistry between the two of them. Did you have a particular um, real life person in mind when you were drawing Everett's character, or you just decided this is what I kind of envision as a black
I think a lot of my characters are composites
man?
of people I have known in the past. I don't take one whole person and plot them down into the novel. They may be bits and pieces of other characters. And yes, I am thinking of one character who, now, Everett comes from very humble beginnings. He doesn't start out as a billionaire. He worked his way up. And yes, I do know someone like that. They didn't reach the heights that Everett did, not many do, but he became very successful coming from humble beginnings. And I certainly thought about him as I was writing Everett. I also looked at some of the Black billionaires that I'm aware of, a couple of them who have been very successful, one in this area,
Mhm.
and I used him. The thing about Everett, though, is I wanted to, I think he's probably one of the more complex characters in the book,
Yeah,
in
definitely.
that he comes off as he's charming. He comes off, in the beginning at least, as easygoing. But as the novel moves on, quite early on, you begin to realize that he has a controlling nature.
Mhm.
He gets jealous easily, as you see with the scene in the gallery when on their first date, um, and also the scene where she picks up one of his books when they're on a date at his friend's house, and he gets probably blows it out of proportion. And at this point, I think she's beginning to realize, or certainly I hope the reader is beginning to realize, that Everett may have something to hide, which is a part of the reason for the complicity of his character.
Yeah. Talk a little bit about his sister, Ida. She too is a very complicated character.
Yes, she is.
Well,
I got when I saw the last film, and I also vaguely remember from the earlier films, is that she had this fixation on Chloe, Everett's first wife. And I have to be careful here to try not to give too much away.
right.
But I thought that was a very important part. That whole dynamic between, in the case of Rebecca, between Mrs. Danvers, I believe, and Chloe, and in this book between what is her name? I forget the name of my own characters. Ida
Ida.
and Angel.
Mhm.
Even though at least in this book, it may not be so much in Rebecca, but at least in this book, I would think that a character like Angel, who's a successful chef, who's married now to Everett Bruce, she has some status
Mhm.
over Ida. But Ida, because of the way she carries herself and uses her relationship with Chloe and with Everett, is able to pull rank over Angel.
Mhm.
And I think that's a very interesting dynamic that changes over time as Angel begins to think, wait a minute, I'm the mistress of the household here.
Right.
I'm the one who should be telling you what to do. It takes her a
Mhm.
while, but she gets there. And I think that that's what makes Angel so interesting is that she has these flaws, but then she's able to pull back on her previous life to overcome those flaws and those concerns and those weaknesses that she sees in herself, also with the help of some of her friends from her old life. And to me, that's what's important with characters, especially with main characters, is that they need to evolve. They don't always necessarily become great people or good people. Some of them end up being worse than they were when they started the novel, but they need to change. They need to have evolved, or else why are you writing the novel? What's the point of the novel? Yes.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. That's a nice segue into the next section that I wanted to talk to you about. I always like to ask other writers this question: what is your writing process? And I
Okay.
think this is always particularly important too for any budding writers that are out there. They're trying to find their way into publishing, and so people like to know, well, how does a great writer do it? So, what is your writing
I
process?
actually get these questions as much, if not more, from readers when I have these events. That's the question is, how do you write? Where do you get your ideas? Those kinds of things. My writing routine has changed. It's
Mhm.
evolved over time. I think when I wrote my first novel, Sisters and Lovers, I
Mhm.
probably that is based heavily on my life, like a lot of first novels probably are, on my life and the lives of my friends. And so while I did plan, some outlining, it was probably a combination of what they call pantsing
Yeah.
and outlining. For my subsequent one, Big Girls Don't Cry, maybe one or two novels, I reverted to the pantsing method. And while it has its advantages, there are things about it that I just decided I didn't want to continue that way. I
Mhm.
like to know where my character is going. I like to know where the story is going. I like to know what's going to happen scene by scene, chapter by chapter. I don't need to know everything, but I need to know some things. So now I'm at the phase where, especially writing suspense, where you have to pretty much make sure everything works out in the end. I'm much more of an outliner now. Now, that doesn't mean that everything I do in the outline or everything I write in the outline ends up in the book or that things don't change. They do a lot. Sometimes I go back and look at my outline and I'm thinking, oh, well, this is another whole book. What did I do with this? But it at least gets you going it at least gives you that security that you can reach an end, even if you don't know what that end exactly is, that you can get where you want to go. So yeah, I've evolved from being sort of a combination to being a pantser and now an outliner. I would certainly encourage new writers to try to outline, to do some kind of outlining, because I think for me it would work better. But every author is different. What
Right.
about yourself? Do you mind me asking?
No, not at all. Because, much like you said, I write thriller and suspense and mystery. I need to have some sense of like what the red herrings are going to be and what the revelations are going to be. And so because of that, I tend to be more of an outliner. As opposed to a pantser being somebody who just sits and writes by the seat
Right.
of his
Yeah,
pants.
you need to know
Um,
where the loose end, you need to have those loose
yeah,
ends tied up. Yeah.
exactly, exactly. And so, and then even with an outline, my story still veers off, if
Yeah,
that
sure.
makes any sense. Like I'll have an outline. I'm like, yeah, okay, this works. And when I say outline, I use the term very loosely. Like I know some people that do like 20-page outlines. I'm talking like
No.
3, 4 pages.
I'm good with 3 or 4 pages, yeah.
Right, exactly. But I need to know kind of what the big beats of the story are. So that's how I tend to
So
write.
that
But
you
like
can
I
see
said,
that it'll work. Yeah.
I always divert from the
You always
manuscript.
what?
I always kind of veer off from the
Of
manuscript.
course, yeah.
Start
The characters tend to get a life of their own.
exactly,
They do
exactly.
what they want to do, yeah.
You kind of mentioned that characters have to evolve. What are some of the other things that you think go into making great characters in a book?
As I may have touched on this, complexity, if a
Mm,
character is one-dimensional, that
yeah,
tends to be boring. I need characters with different layers to their personality. As I said, if characters that change or do unexpected things. Um,
I agree.
it's yeah, probably that would be the biggest thing is they have to be complex. They have to surprise you,
Hmm.
to do things that you wouldn't have imagined they would do. Um, yeah, but that's pretty much it that I can think of right now. I may think of other things.
Yeah, I agree. I often tell new writers who ask me about writing, good characters, and I'm like, a great character doesn't necessarily have to be likable, but
No,
they have to be interesting. They have to be somebody that you're like, why is she doing that? Or, well, let me just read another chapter and see why this guy is behaving the way they behave. And that can be a character who is likable and friendly or whatever. It could also be a character who does very dastardly things too.
yes, they keep you turning the pages.
Yeah,
You want to know what they're going to do
yeah,
next, what they're
exactly,
up to.
exactly.
Yeah,
Because
yeah,
why else come to a book if you're going to read about somebody who's perfect, right?
yeah,
Um,
exactly. There are no perfect people, so your
there
characters
are no
shouldn't be
perfect people,
perfect. No, that
right?
doesn't make sense.
Exactly. And I think readers come to books looking for characters that they can relate to. Like, that looks like I
But do
know
they come
somebody.
to, but do they come with a realistic viewpoint of what they're like? If they're
Mhm.
coming to see these perfect characters because they think they're perfect, no.
No, no.
Um, yeah, so it's complicated. It's difficult. But keep doing what you're doing. It's
Right,
working.
right. So you have had a long and illustrious career. You've written a lot of different stuff. Yes.
Okay.
The
Yeah,
rest
oh,
of
thank
us,
you.
bow down. So I am curious, is there any type of project that, it could be, novels or something else, but is there any type of project or initiative that you've not done to date that you think you might like to tackle, or you've always said, oh, that would be interesting to do?
Well, I've already done that because initially I was writing women's fiction. They called them sister girl novels back when I was writing them, we were writing women's fiction. But yes, I was writing women's fiction, relationship novels, and romantic novels, not the romance in the typical sense, but relationship novels is what I used to call them. And now I've evolved to my last two into suspense. So that was my dream. In fact, when I wrote the relationship novel,
Mhm.
my first novel, Sisters and Lovers, I really wanted to write suspense, but I didn't think that I could do it. I don't know why. I thought that you had to have a specific skill set. I read a lot of mysteries. I read every Agatha Christie book. I read all the Nancy Drew books. I read all the Scott Shuro. I read everything. But I just didn't think, I guess I had a worship of it. I don't know that I couldn't do that. I put it on a pedestal. So I wrote the relationship novels because certainly that was central to my life and the life that I was living. I was single then with girlfriends. So I wrote about three single and attached women who were having problems with the men in their lives. Um, so then years later, I wrote about, I think, 8 or 9 of them. I took
Mhm.
a break because I was kind of burned out and a lot of personal things happened in my life. And so I took a break for about 10 years. And when I came back and was trying to figure out what to do next,
Right.
I thought, why not take a chance on the suspense novel? I read Lawrence Sanders. My dad and I would change all the different, suspense and thriller novels. I thought, why not take a chance and see if it would work. And so that's my change. That's my, doing something different. As to whether or not I do something different in the future, I'm not going to tell my age, but I will say that maybe this is it. I don't know. There would have to be something really outstanding at this point for
Yeah.
me to go on into a novel. Yes.
Mm.
I mean, I've had
Let,
a
let
wonderful
me
ride.
ask.
Mhm.
Yes, yeah, you really have.
I
So
have.
let me ask this. Which do you like better, writing women's fiction or writing suspense?
Suspense because I get to keep the women's fiction aspect of it. I get to keep the romance part of it. I just add suspense to it for romantic suspense. So I get the best of both worlds. I'm the type who needs the challenge. If I've written 8 or 9 books focusing on one genre or one theme, I want to move on to something else. I want to challenge myself, which is what I did.
Mm. Well, I got to tell you, see, I write primarily mystery and thriller, but I always try and have a little bit of romance in my books because I just think, you know, first and foremost, why not? And then everybody likes a little kissing
A
in a
little
book,
romance,
right?
yes.
But I am always, whenever I get to that part, I am always like a little nervous because I
Why? Because
what
that's not your wheelhouse, yes.
because I
Well,
want
you're
it to
more
come
comfortable
off
with the suspense, but not so much the romance.
right.
I'm
Exactly.
the opposite.
Yes, we're like the opposites of each other. And I am always a little nervous when I get to that part because I want to make sure that it comes off without
Authentic.
seeming like, right, authentic. I don't want it
Yeah.
to seem hokey or seeming like I just put it there like as a placeholder. I want it to be, like you say, authentic and like if they're going to have a kiss, it needs to be like a real kiss and not just because they're standing under an umbrella in the
And
rain,
it's
you know?
well, you have to plot not red herrings, but you do have to plot things so that when they get to that point and they have the big kiss, you're ready for it. So you are plotting and
Mhm.
planting different things as you go. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
very interesting that you said that though. Do
Yeah.
you ever see yourself writing something different besides suspense?
Um, I I joke with my agent because my stories tend to be so dark sometimes, and I tell her I'm gonna write like a rom-com or something one day just to kind of lighten
I get it.
the mood. But you know, I have always, and I can't even believe this is why I don't think I'll ever do it. But I like a little horror, not a lot of horror, because I'm a real big fraidy cat. Um, and so with my third book, What You Leave Behind, I put a ghost in the book.
Oh,
And
really?
yeah. And so I was really kind of proud of myself because like you, I always like to challenge myself.
Some
But I think,
supernatural.
yeah, yes. But I think that's about as far as I'll go. Like that even that scared me a little bit.
Well, if
I'm
you're
a
scaring yourself, you must be doing something right.
maybe.
Okay.
So
I
before
have one of
we
your books. I'm going to this is next. As soon as I get through all this, the books
oh
are next for me. Yeah,
well
the,
thank
the
you for
covers
that.
are I can really get into the covers.
Oh
They're
yeah.
very good.
I'm glad you brought that up. This cover I love. I mean, and it was so funny because I first got the book and I thought to myself, oh, those are such pretty flowers. And it wasn't until after I looked and then I see these hands.
They're wilting.
No head, there's no face. And I thought, oh, that's
I
lovely.
love that jacket. I think
So
it's
talk
probably
to us about it.
one of my favorites. Yes,
Yeah, this
really
is
good.
good. Did you tell them that you wanted something like this, or how did it go?
I think they came back with the cover, and as you know, you don't get complete say over what they do,
Right.
but they came back with the cover. I liked it, but I just thought at that time, I don't think the flowers were wilting. I said, can you kind of make the flowers more wilting? Because there are flowers in the book, the sterling roses in the book, and I think that's what they were trying to depict. So I thought, make the
Yeah.
flowers wilt, and I think you got it. And you did.
Yeah, I just love these hands down here that are not
Yeah,
connected
because
to a
yes,
body. Creepy. Creepy. I love it.
good.
I like creepy, so
I see. Maybe I need to hang with you more so I can write more creepy novels.
right?
You know what?
So,
I have a friend. We were out at the beach, and I remember we were looking at the ocean and the tide, and I said something weird about how the ocean was going to come up and swallow us all. And she looked at me and said, Connie, I didn't know you thought like that. I'm like, yeah, and that's why I write these books.
I know, right? Sometimes I think I scare people a little bit. I was once in this workshop and we had to read a portion of, what we were working on. And I was working on my first book, which, opens up with a murder on the second page or something.
Mhm.
And so I read that portion, that kind of opening scene. And, in the workshop, everybody sits around and they listen. And there was probably about 10 of us. And so I
Mhm.
read this and I just kept my head down. And then I looked up and everybody was like, what in the world? And
You
I
didn't
thought,
realize
my
you were scared.
goodness, right. And so one of the people in the workshop was like, you must be like one of the nicest people I know. And that is so dark. And I'm like, so
I know. You never know what's going on
yeah,
in
right.
his
In
brain
the
cells.
dark
Exactly.
recesses of your head. Um, so listen, before we turn it over to Q&A, questions from the audience, if you're comfortable sharing this, are you working on something else? Is there something in the horizon? Do you have some ideas bubbling? I know you got some ideas bubbling.
Um, something I hesitate to get too much. I've always got something percolating.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, we're looking into doing a film adaptation of one of my novels. It's in the works, and I know you know these things. They make progress and then they fall. But this
Yeah.
one looks good, so I'm keeping my fingers crossed, and yeah, we'll see one
Oh,
of my
yes.
novels into. I think there's every writer's dream probably to see one
Yeah.
of their novels on the screen.
Yes,
Yeah.
indeed. Well, we will speak it into the universe It's
Thank
going
you.
to happen. Connie Briscoe's book will be adapted
Yeah.
for television or film. Yay. All right.
Yes, yes. In
Spoken.
fact, I got the contract today. I'll sign it, send it off. We'll see.
I love it. I love
Thank
it.
you. Thank you.
Congratulations on that.
Thank you so much.
Congratulations. I love it.
Mhm.
So listen, I'm going to turn it over to John and see if we have any questions
Okay,
from the audience.
We do.
good. All right,
Um,
nice meeting you, and thank you so much for agreeing to do this. We got you at the last minute, but at least we got you. I really enjoyed
Listen,
talking to you.
you're an icon. I would
Oh,
be happy to
thank
do.
you. So are
Yes.
you in your
I'll be
way.
too
Yes.
happy to do this. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Mhm. What you got, John?
we do have some questions. Before I give them to you, I first want to say Rebecca is one of my favorite all-time books. I was thrilled when I got the chance to read Chloe because I think you gracefully pay homage to that classic,
Thank
but
you.
you put your own stamp on it. I loved how Angel is so much more modern and assertive in your book. I mean, I love Rebecca, but let's face it, the heroine was kind of passive. She let things happen to her almost up into the end. But your heroine was like, no, I'm opening the drapes. No, I'm going to take charge. I'm going to do things. So I really thought that was
Mm.
a very terrific touch that you added to the novel.
Mhm.
Yeah, well, thank you. I really appreciate that. I think Rebecca, is such a classic
Hmm.
that you probably get many more reinterpretations or reimaginations of the book because the themes are they're universal. They can be applied in so many different ways. So she really did a good job. I mean, I immediately realized when reading it that, wow, this could apply to the Black community. I'm sure could apply to others. So, yeah.
Hmm.
Thank you. Our first question is for both of you, actually. Apparently, people have been tuning in and they're fascinated by the bookshelves behind you, and they'd like to know if there's one particular item on your bookshelves that's special to you in any way.
On the bookshelves. I'm not
Bookshelf.
going to get up because I don't have pants on, but not presentable pants. This here. It's very easy for me. Dorothy West. I don't know if you can see it because I
Oh,
can't see myself. And this is a signed copy of her book about, living on the island,
mhm.
the wedding. It was turned into a movie.
Yeah.
And she wrote it when she was probably in her 80s or so. She had lived on the island all her
Oh,
life and wrote
nice.
a book that became, I consider it a classic, excuse me. And personally signed it for me. I have, and I'll let Wanda get in here in a bit. My first three novels, the publisher did these bound copies. Oops, and they are my treasures. Of the first three, Sisters and Lovers,
Oh, nice.
Beautiful.
A Long Way from Home, and Big Girls Don't Cry. And they are leather bound. You don't get these anymore, but this is a long time ago. You don't get
That
these
is
anymore. Look at this.
it's lovely.
Yes. And I have some copies uh, signed some by some authors I admire, such as Walter Mosley and some others.
Hmm.
But I see those to pull those right away. Wanda.
So for me, mine doesn't have anything to do with books, but you'll see this picture right here behind me. Those are my three kids who are the
Hmm.
most precious things to me, um, and their dad. Um, but I'm turning the camera ever so slightly so you can see. So there's Big Bird and there's a Barbie doll there. And so I keep them on my shelf because these were the favorite toys of my kids when they were little, especially the
Oh,
two old.
wow.
And the big bird, I think I bought that for my oldest son when he was probably maybe two, and he would play with it. And then as he got older, and I was all sad because it was like, oh, he's getting older, he's not playing with it anymore. And so he and I started this game where we would hide it in different places. And so this thing has gone off to college with him and then come back home. And I found it underneath my cabinet, holding a bottle of shampoo. And so we would hide it around different places. And
Oh,
so
wow.
sometimes it's gone on vacation with me. He snuck it into my suitcase. And so the whole gist is to hide it somewhere where the
Mhm.
person won't see it until they're actually there. And Barbies were my daughter's very favorite toy. So I keep those there because my kids are all grown. We have a
All these were my
16-year-old.
toys. Okay. Okay.
But
And
yeah, my
but you
kids
kept
love,
yours. Okay.
yeah,
Mine in terrible shape.
yeah.
Let
But
me get
I
this. This
do
is
have,
Victoria.
what's that?
This is Winnie
Oh,
the Pooh. She bought me years ago that I keep on my shelf. It's
nice,
a Winnie the Pooh bear. It's very
nice,
precious to me. It's for my agent, for those who don't know who Victoria is. Okay,
nice.
that's about it.
Our next question is for Connie, and it's someone who would like you to talk a little bit about how you've seen publishing change over the years.
Oh,
Not
how much time do
sure
I
you have
have?
enough time to answer that fully, but give it your
You
best
know, when
shot.
I started publishing so many years ago, there was no internet, there was no social media. We were just getting away from sending manuscripts around to our agents, to publishers, to editors through the snail mail because you couldn't send them the files, even though computers were coming out, the files were too big to send through the computers. And so all of that has changed. I think, I was in publishing by the time we were going through the changes. I left and I came back. We went through even more changes. We were more dependent on social media. And I think I can't put my finger on it, but it seems as if something's missing, something's lost. The Everything is done, zapped around and done so quickly. The personalization has been lost in some ways. Uh, you get used to it quickly because there are also conveniences. It is convenient to be able to send a manuscript um, to an agent over the wires. But I don't know, it just seems in some ways less personal. Um, this social media, again, there are conveniences in making it easy to get the word out, even if you're self-published or you have a small following. And so it's good for people in that situation. But I think it also makes us slaves to the algorithm. We're so dependent on social media getting the word out rather than, word of mouth and publishers getting the writers around and getting out and meeting the people. I would like to give that a lot of thought. A lot has changed, but I can't quite put my finger on it because I've been thinking about the book right now. But you wouldn't recognize the industry compared to what it was when I was doing it.
I think you're right. There are pros and cons to publishing today. Sometimes we've lost that special feeling. I remember as a reader, you used to wait like a year for your favorite author to come out with a new book, and now everyone wants authors to
Mhm.
produce 6 books a year, if not more.
Mhm. And that's pressure on the authors.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Our next question is for Wanda. They want to know if you had fun writing about your ghost.
I did. I did. That was my first foray into doing something like that. And true story, I tell you, I'm a fraidy cat. True story. I was working on that book and I was here home alone. I work in this room. It's like right off my living room. And I was home alone. My son was at school, my husband at work. And I'm just working away and I hear a noise. And it sounds like it's coming from upstairs now. I stopped like you always do, right? You're working and you stop. And I'm like, okay, there shouldn't be any noises coming from upstairs because there's not supposed to be anybody upstairs. And so I was like, oh, it's my imagination. I went back to work. A few minutes later, I hear noise again. And this time I'm like, oh God, I gotta go look.
Oh,
I
really?
can't, right. Well, I don't want it to come in here on me. At least if I go look, I've got a chance to run away. Otherwise, I'm stuck in this room. So I go
I'm
out
going.
so I go out and I look all around the house and I see nothing. Nothing has fallen, nothing, it's nothing. And by the time I get back down here to the desk, I'm sitting and now I can't concentrate, right? Because I'm waiting for the noise to come again. So I just kind of packed up the day's work there. And it did make me question, like, you know, maybe this ghost is in the house with me. Like, what is that about? But
She's a friendly ghost.
I hope so. I
Is
hope
that
so.
how she want is something like that wind up in your book?
Um, you know what? I think we're gonna have to put it in the next book, yeah.
Okay.
But if I'm not too afraid to write it. But I did
They
that.
say how when you said you heard something and you went to investigate, they're often saying how I saw something where it says, and my instinct would have been to run if I heard a noise. And I often hear about how that's the difference between black people and white people in the movies. And there's a spooky noise, and we run and get out of there. And the
Well,
white people they go and investigate. And I'm
yeah,
like, no, 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 no.
yeah. That's part of the reason why I went out to investigate, because there's no exit from this room. So I'd have to go
Oh,
that
you
way.
had to go out.
So it's like at least I stand a shot of getting out of the house if I go out to investigate.
Oh, okay.
Our next question is for both of you again. This particular viewer would like to know, having written one book, does it get easier with each additional book, or does it become harder because you now know what's involved in the process?
I'll let you go first, Connie.
Um, I would say yes and no. I say yes because with each book you learn a little more. At least I do. And the first book is always the scariest because you don't know if you can do it. And so once you have that first one as a success, it does build up your confidence to make it easier to go into the next book. However, with the next book, especially if the first book does well, you're constantly up against meeting expectations. A lot more is expected if you have a successful first book. With the first book, they're just waiting and hoping. And if you do well, great. But that means you have to do better on the next book and better on the next book. And I also think it gets harder with subsequent books because when you're writing that first book and nobody knows you're out there, you can take your time, you can revise, you can sit aside for 6 months, you can come back to it until you get it right. When you have a book deal and they're waiting for the second and third book and so forth, there's a deadline. And most writers, even if they don't want to miss those deadlines. A lot of them do, but they don't want to. And they certainly can't take 6 months off while they think about what they're writing. So yes and no. The subsequent novels become both easier and harder for different reasons.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. For me, books are always hard, because I always want to make sure that my next book is as good as, or if not better than the last book I wrote. And particularly when you're writing thrillers and mysteries, you don't want the reader to kind of say, oh, okay, here we go. The guy's going to jump out of the closet. She did that in the last book. So you always want to one up yourself in terms of the clues and the red herrings. And so for me, that's what makes it that much more difficult. I mean, sure, it's easier because now you know, okay, I need to do about, this much work. I need to have, my butt in the chair every day because I need to get out a certain amount of words and things like that. Yeah, that kind of stuff, but in terms of writing a quality book that is going to meet the reader's expectations, it's always hard for
It's
me.
always hard.
Always hard.
And it's
Yeah.
always that voice telling you, filling you with doubt in your head.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
We just have a
And no
couple.
matter how many books you write.
Right.
We just have a couple more questions before we run out of time. One of them is for Wanda. They would like you to tell us a little bit about your latest book, What You Leave Behind.
Sure. So what you leave behind is a story of Dina Wood. And Dina is just come through what I consider a grand slam of misfortune. She's just been fired from her prestigious legal job in Atlanta. She has her husband has asked her for a divorce. She's just been divorced, and she is still grieving the loss of her mother who died the previous year. And so after the divorce, she's kind of like, enough. And she goes back to her hometown, which is Brunswick, Georgia, along the coast of southern Georgia. And she decides to return to her hometown and kind of lick her wounds. And she moves in with her dad and his new wife, who happens to be her mom's best friend. So she's got misfortune everywhere. But she, as part of her grieving process, she goes out driving, and she kind of hears her mother's voice in her head. And one day she stumbles upon the property of this oceanfront property, and the property is beautiful. There's nothing on it except for a trailer and an old man with the dog. And he runs her off the property because he thinks she's there to buy it. And he tells her he would never sell it. The property's been his family forever. He runs her off with a gun.
Mhm.
She leaves, but she can't get him out of her mind. She returns a week later, and the old man is gone, the trailer is gone, and now there's a sign up that says for sale commercial development. And she goes, something's not right about that. And it leads her into a dark conspiracy around property, illegal land grabs. And it deals a lot with a legal concept called heirs property, where you can lose your home and your property if you don't leave some legal disposition for it after you die, like a will or a trust.
Mhm.
And it takes place in the Gullah Geechee community. The Gullah Geechee are direct descendants of West Africans that were brought to this country. Yeah, and
Mhm.
enslaved. So, if you've ever thought, hey, what's a fun read that's a thriller and about real estate law, I guarantee you it is good.
I have a friend who's Gullah Geechee.
Really? Yeah.
Very good friend.
Yeah, it's a very rich culture, and
Yes.
so the book, yeah, takes place in the Gullah Geechee community.
Mhm. Oh, okay.
Our last question is for Connie. And this particular person said, now that you've taken your spin on Rebecca, is there another classic novel, if you were given the chance, you'd like to put your own touch on?
No, I don't have a particular one in mind. I do like a number of the Hitchcock films. They lend themselves to so much reinterpretation, but I don't have anyone, either his or another author's, in mind. If I do decide to write another novel, that would be probably the first place where I would start looking to see if I can reimagine or update one of these older classic novels into something more contemporary with a Black twist or theme. You know, that has gotten me interested in it. I'm interested in doing that.
Can't believe how quickly our hour has flown by. We've been very fortunate at the Poison Pen to have with us virtually author Connie Briscoe, whose new book is Chloe, as well as author Wanda Morris, whose new book is What You Leave Behind. I'd like to thank both authors for sharing their time and their insights with us. And for those tuning in, thank you for joining us for another virtual author event at the Poison Pen Bookstore.
Thank you for having us, John.
You take care, Connie. So fun
Yes,
talking
I'll see
to
you,
you.
Wanda.
All right, take care.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.